speech needs to be allowed. Freedom of speech it's one of the core tenets of American philosophy. But also, there are limits to every freedom that we possess. I would argue that those materials are harmful to people, specifically minors. Therefore, having that content available to minors, it doesn't meet the criteria of I'm allowed to do things so long as it doesn't harm other people. You're actively harming other people by hosting that content and having it free to whoever.
Good morning, Idaho. Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast, where we talk about what is going on in the wonderful state of Idaho. For those tuning in for the first time, we like to have a little banter before we get into the stories, but I understand if you are short on time. I know it is a very precious resource, so we put the timestamps in the description so you can jump straight to the stories that you are interested in. For those of you that stayed with us here, welcome to the Banter. Glad to have you here with us today. Hopefully you're able to stay cool. The hot weather has been very hot. Thankfully, the place I work at, the AC unit actually is doing the inverse. I am actually having to wear a coat at work to not freeze. It's kind of weird when you see everyone outside trying to stay cool, but you're trying to stay warm because the AC unit hates you and won't stop cooling your office. But that's a completely different story, but hopefully you've been able to stay as cool as I have. But speaking of someone who definitely can stay cool and not in the temperature area, but just kind of in stressful situations, I have John co-hosting again with me today.
I am here, Tyler, and I guess I can stay calm in stressful situations. I don't have a lot of experience doing that, but, sure, why not? Yeah, no, I get you, though. Office life is weird when you're in an office and it's cold.
Right.
And so you have to wear lots of layers. The thing I always find funny with office life is the variance between different people who wear different types of clothing. And so some people will wear a lot and be hot, and then other people will wear not much and be cold. And both sides complain, and I just find it funny.
No, I've definitely run into that. There's one gal I've been around for different stuff, and I could be sitting there and I'd be like, oh, I'm comfortable or whatever. It's a little warm. And she'd be like, I'm burning. We need to break the temperature down. And I'm like, all right, fine. I'm not going to take it any colder. But it is interesting how some people, the amount of variation they can handle is a lot less, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, and I don't know. It's one of those odd things that even different people are better at different temperatures. I run hot, and so it's nice when it gets cold, and it's a bummer when it's hot, but it is what it is. I just get used to it. I don't know. It's been a good week so far. I'm enjoying the summer. I know my kids are doing lots of swimming, and it's been good.
The heat is the perfect excuse, in my opinion, to go hiking and try to get up into the mountains. Because look, it's cooler. I need to get away. It's just too hot. I have to go, you see. But I have not quite gotten to that. I did go over to Sweet, the Gem County area over on Saturday, and that was really nice to go around. It was still hot, though, but thankfully we went up kind of over to the Emmett Butte there, which, I don't know, maybe there was like a 5 to 10 degree decrease in the overall temperature, but it was still a pretty drive to go do all that. But I still really want to try to get over to Stanley to do some hiking there, because Stanley, I think, is like 20 degrees less than it is usually in the valley, and there's some really nice hiking trails over there. You just have to bite the bullet on the drive time, so looking forward to doing that and taking the drone with me.
Yeah, I really need to get up there and experience some of that area, especially with Boise getting very hot. We were down in, it was very far southwest Nampa for a family reunion. We rented out a farmhouse down there.
Nice.
Had a great time. That was the weekend when it got really cool for 3 days. So that was kind of fun.
Right. Was it on the south side of the lake?
I couldn't tell you where it was.
Okay.
It was far away. That's all I know. And it was very southwest. I think it was really close to Lake Lowell.
Because I know there's one that I regularly would drive by. There's a road that runs on like the back south bit of Lake Lowell there. You can rent it out, but they also are like, I think, an arborist or a tree place, and they have this big barn and thing that they can kind of do, and it's it's walking distance from Lake Lowell there. But it's on the south side of the lake there, so you have to kind of drive around it a little bit to get to it there.
Yeah, we didn't have to. I never did drive around the lake, so we're thinking of two different things. But still, that area is, it's all farmland, and It was fun. It was nice that
For
weekend.
now it is. It was really encouraging, though, to hear for the midweek report. I was recording one of the things, and there's a point sometimes where I'm very much reading the articles that we do on there, and then there's another point where I'm just moving through them because, if you've got 20 to 15 stories you're trying to get out each week, it can be a little bit like, let's move. But there was a report that came out in that, and I think it was talking about the amount of homes. We went from the amount available on average from 1,000 to 3,000 is currently what we're sitting at on the most recent report, which was super interesting here, which there's a lot of farmland that's had to been sacrificed for it. That's where my brain got the prompt from when you're talking about the farmland, but it'll be interesting to see what effect that will have independent of the interest rates.
Yeah, I know a lot of people don't like the fact that we're building so many more houses, and that means that we're taking out farmland, and I get it, but also it's got to be good for the economy. We had to drive down to Bruno and Mountain View, and so we were coming back up from the east side of Boise, and so we drove past Micron, and I hadn't been past Micron in a minute. Dude, it's Crane City out there.
Are going ham out there.
They are. It's crazy. It's crazy. That makes me want to go down to the new Meta site and see how that construction's going too.
I heard with that one, they're
just
pushing
going nuts.
dirt around. Last I heard. I don't know how long they're going to keep pushing
well,
dirt.
and they had to do a bunch of water stuff.
Okay.
Get all of their water services and all of that stuff taken care of. So yeah, it's a lot of utility work right now.
Okay.
Not as much vertical construction yet, but
okay.
Still, it's a lot. It's a lot of square footage to be made ready.
I think we may have reported on it either in January or something. There was some point on here in the show. Someone can go back and probably easily find it, but we talked about it, that there was an evaluation looking at how much was built, and the amount of commercial space accounted for, I think it was 50 or 60% of all the stuff that was built in the valley, which it's crazy, but it makes sense. There's a brand new skyscraper I know that's going up in downtown Boise. I know a couple guys that are on that crew that are doing the construction for the Micron, which, for reference, that's funded by the CHIPS Act, which is your tax dollars right there. So take it or leave it on that one, but that's what's happening there.
Yeah, talking international politics, it can only be a good thing to bring industry back to the United States from where it's been overseas. So I don't know if I necessarily like the CHIPS Act, but I do like the fact that we're going to build stuff here. My problem with government funding is it tends to get overspent on projects. And so instead of doing things well, you kind of end up overdoing all of the things. And that's not a great use of money. But either way, bringing industry back to the United States is a good thing. So, that works.
Right. No, it is good. I mean, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's a place at times where we've seen, if we go back into history, where the government has stimulated or put money in to a degree that can be good, air quotations. But other points, he's not so good. But I'm glad that Micron is doing that. They've been able to keep their space here. I know the HP, I don't think, does anything anymore. They used to be a big player in the valley, which, they're, again, interesting fun fact. One of Idaho's biggest exports per value, not per quantity, is actual electronics. And you can thank Micron and all the techie people for that. So it was kind of an interesting thing. It always surprises me when I think about it. For me, it's been a good week. It's just been a hot week. It's been a busy week. If you couldn't tell right now, I have the fan blowing on top of me. Hopefully it doesn't come through the micro, trying to stay cool with all the heat and stuff. So I'm very much looking forward to hopefully it cooling down a little bit. I heard some reports it might get cooler this next week as of the recording of this. So, that'll be after Sunday. It's supposed to cool off. But worst case, it just means I'll have to go do more hiking, which is so bad for me. But, oh well. Moving into our first story here, Idaho Bill Breakdown, House Bill 498, minor porn ban in practice. Last week we examined Senate Bill 1275, which gives legal clarity and adds protection to employers who allow their employees to have firearms at work. This week we'll be examining House Bill 498, which was sponsored by Ben Taze and Senator Kevin Cook in the Senate. It looks to require age verification for pornography content online, which in this segment we'll be looking more in depth on how that all applies to those sites, which sites it even applies to, the legal action people can take on this, and what this law kind of gives teeth-wise, and if it is censorship or if Idaho is doing some much-needed updating to our media laws here, which I'm going to throw it over to John here to kind of break down what exactly the bill says here.
Yeah, so this bill requires websites where at least 1/3 of the content is pornographic to implement reasonable age verification measures to prevent minors from accessing the content. So, I guess more than just a click the button that says you're over 18? I don't know. It adds provisions to protect minors from harmful material on the internet. It has an age verification requirement. The bill requires commercial entities that publish or distribute material harmful to minors through the internet to perform reasonable age verification methods to restrict access by minors. It also has a definition of harmful material. It defines material harmful to minors as any communication that depicts nudity, sexual content, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse, and taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interests of minors. There's a private cause of action that the bill establishes, which allows individuals, parents or guardians of minors, directly affected by violations to seek legal remedy through private lawsuits. The bill also provides affirmative defenses for publishers or distributors who have taken reasonable steps to restrict access by minors. And then, finally, the bill specifies that enforcement will be exclusively through private civil actions, not through government prosecution. So a few other points to note are that pornographic sites that implement an age verification system shall not retain any identifying information of the individual after age verification has been performed. And then also the civil action allowed by the bill does not apply to any bona fide news or public interest broadcast, website, video report, or event, and shall not be construed to affect any rights of any news gathering organizations. So that's a lot said, but the question kind of is, well, where were we and where are we moving to? So prior to this bill, House Bill 498, Idaho didn't have any specific laws requiring age verification for accessing pornographic websites. However, laws that did exist focused more on prohibiting the distribution of obscene materials in physical settings, like stores selling adult content, rather than regulating online content access. And so, I know we've talked about it before, Tyler, there's a little bit of similarity between places like liquor stores or adult entertainment stores or even, adult entertainment venues where there's an ID check at the door, or heck, even bars. There's an ID check at the door. You're not allowed in if you're under whatever the age requirement is. Typically it's 21 because if there's alcohol involved, it's 21. If there's not, then it could be 18. But yeah, so it seems to me, and we've talked about it before, that those two things, we're trying to draw in line the internet with what we've already deemed that makes sense for physical places.
Right. One side of it might be that someone comes at it and, says, well, this is censorship. The government is basically saying this speech or this imagery is approved and this one's disapproved. And if you want to look at some censorship or what the government can or can't say, then maybe you could see it through that lens. In this case, I would say this is where, you'll often hear the example, you shouldn't always push something to its extreme because obviously it's not going to work great, like the straw man fallacy or something. But I think this is a perfect example of where you're not pushing it per se to its extreme. You're just logically applying it to one of the most extreme examples from more of a libertarian position, and you start to see it fall apart where the libertarian, respectfully, I think, would say that, this is censorship, this is the government saying what you can or can't talk about or see, right? It's limiting your options. But from a true conservative perspective, and just taking the standard law which we have right now, if you want to appeal to that independent of your political persuasion, right now we currently look at porn legally as the fact that's for adults, not for minors. And so we have passed laws, and we currently still have laws on the books that say you can't see that. But then we have this cool thing called the internet that doesn't fit in the boxes of magazines or strip clubs. And so I would argue more that, and as we've talked about and you hinted to, that this is just extending that logic out to the internet and saying, hey, we're not saying pornography sites can exist. We're not saying they can't be in the state and provide resources, but you got to take steps so that children can't see it.
Yeah, and it's one of those interesting things because the question really comes down to how do you implement that sort of thing online? And I understand the standpoint that says, hey, this is speech. Speech needs to be allowed. Freedom of speech it's one of the core tenets of American philosophy. And to that I agree to a certain extent, but also there are limits to every freedom that we possess. And if you want to take the libertarian standpoint or viewpoint, well, I would almost argue that those materials are harmful to people, specifically minors. Therefore, having that content available to minors, it doesn't meet the criteria of I'm allowed to do things so long as it doesn't harm other people. You're actively harming other people by hosting images, videos, written word. Gosh, I think that's about it. Or I guess physical product that you can buy. But you are actually harming people by hosting that.
You're enabling.
By hosting that content and having it free to whoever. So even looking at the libertarian standpoint, I would argue that libertarianism would still have to lean towards protecting minors against those sorts of things, unless you're a libertarian who believes in total anarchy and there should be no government, at which point I don't know why we're still having a conversation. So
Right. And another thing that I think sometimes gets lost in discussion, and specifically on this bill, and I want to point at it, and you can see many other examples across the state in Idaho with our laws, is all these different restrictions, be it the library bill, if any of you have heard about that. I know that went far and wide beyond the political circles that got passed. The left is whining about that to a certain degree, and then this bill and other ones we've talked about. This is about minors. This has nothing to do with adults, right? That's a big difference. It's one thing if we sit there and say, okay, all of society can't consume this thing. It's another thing if you're just saying adult or minors who, they're called minors for a reason. There's a delineation there. They don't have legal jurisdiction over themselves. They're not seen as full adults within the law and within just the general societal structure. They are under the authority of their parents. And to a certain degree, obviously, primarily, it should be the stewardship of the parent, but to a small degree as well, the state and the public area, that we're just saying, no, minors should not see that content. It'd be another thing if we were telling adults not to, and that's a completely different discussion. It has links to it, but I think people often miss that point when we're talking about these things. This isn't banning you as an adult going and doing it. It's just trying to put restrictions on minors for doing that. And even in this bill, it doesn't tell pornography sites how to do it. It just says you need to verify the age of the user that is trying to access the site and prevent underage people from accessing it. However you do that porn site, go ahead and do it, but it has to fit within these criteria.
Yeah, overall, I like the legislation. I think it's good. I think it does exactly what it sets out to do. It'll be interesting to see what comes about from this. I know legislation like this has been really good in other states and has knocked out some very prominent websites, and they just don't operate in some states now because it's not worth it, because they're going to get sued to oblivion, or they're going to have to implement age verification, which sounds a little ridiculous.
Well, funny
and nobody's
enough,
going to want to put in their driver's license into a website like that, because you're kind of opening yourself up to some problems there.
Right. No, funny enough that you would say that. I actually have the number here. The parent company of one of the biggest porn websites out there, it's spelled AYLO, ALO, whatever. I don't care to pronounce it correctly. Anywho, many people will know they pulled out of a lot of different states when stuff like this has been applied. But there was one state they didn't do that with, which was Louisiana. And they reported that their traffic on their site dropped by 80% in the state when they did so, when they asked for IDs. So that gives you a little bit of context. Also, as of, I think it was Friday of last week, they have also pulled out of Idaho and 5 other states who have passed similar legislation this session.
Nice. Well, so what's interesting about that Louisiana number is the question of, all right, so there's an 80% decrease in traffic. What does that number mean? And it would be interesting to talk to all of the people that are no longer watching or accessing that website specifically, but all right, so does that mean that 80% of the people that were viewing that material were minors and therefore just aren't able to access it anymore? Or is it just 80% of people don't want to put in their credentials? So, I don't know, maybe half of that 80% are minors and half are not. I don't know. That's an interesting number that could tell an interesting story with more information.
I would lean, here again, this is pure speculation. I would lean that it's more the latter, that people don't want to give their... Okay, there's a certain degree that we're willing to sit there and, okay, website, you can have this information or that, but then when you're getting to someone's government ID, which that gets into security issues and other stuff, and pornography sites aren't the best known for reputable behavior. Shocker there. I couldn't have seen that coming.
The joke was always, don't download that stuff or else you're going to ruin your computer, because that's where all of the viruses and the Trojan horses and all of the bad stuff, it's all linked to downloading that material. So, yeah.
Totally. Give them your ID.
Of course we don't trust those websites. Yeah. No. Just, no, that's a bad... Don't do it. Don't do that.
That's when you're really addicted.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's where you got to take a life check there. Anywho, but yeah, I would wager to lean that the average person is sitting there and saying, it's not worth that. I'll find other ways, be it other applications. There's certain social media ones that still allow for that. That's the part I'm interested in seeing. What will happen is, I don't know what percentage, because the threshold for Idaho's bill is, I think it's, 2/3 or something of their content is pornographic in nature or explicit, or I'm going to use the word pornographic. They give a full definition of the bill. If you want to say that this bill is too broad, go look at it. It specifically goes through, it's got like 2 pages of the definitions for a word. So think of a word, there's probably a definition in there for it.
It's even 1/3 of the content.
Okay, so if it's 1/3, the question I would be curious to is if that will apply to some platforms like, for instance, Reddit and Twitter, that they have features where you can easily flip a switch and you won't see any of that stuff, but it's still there. I don't know what percentage of their total content is made up of that. If it's a major part, then that means Twitter and Reddit, and I don't know about... I doubt Facebook. Facebook's a bit more draconian about their sweeping and cleaning, and they try to keep it more family-friendly. That's one of the benefits of massive censorship on Facebook. If they'll have to do age verification on Twitter and Reddit, or... Yeah, that'll be interesting. I haven't heard anything on that yet.
It will be. Or if 30% of the content on Twitter is of that nature, which that honestly, that wouldn't shock me if it was. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that does for any number of websites.
Technically, if you're paying for Twitter's paid thing, like the check mark, you have to show your ID for that to verify your paid account. You have to show that. So in theory, they already have all the things there. They already have the filter in a sense. The only thing that they might have to do, I don't know about Reddit side of things, but with Twitter, they may have to get a bit more heavy-handed in making sure that people who produce that content on there actually mark it as that. That's the only drawback that I've noticed with stuff with Twitter, is you can turn on that filter thing, but sometimes things will get through. You'll report it, and then it'll get updated or whatever, but it's purely like an honor system where the creator has to say, hey, my page is blank content.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this does, because so far as I'm concerned, this is only a good thing.
So yeah, wrapping that all together and all of me and John's going-ons about this, biggest takeaway is for minors and parents, it's now more difficult for minors to access pornographic content in Idaho, and it actually gives parents more legal power if they believe children have been exposed to pornography online. So for you parents out there, look, you have that resource at your fingertips. For those that are maybe not parents, but adult users that still want that, then there'll be more frequent probably age verification requests or less pornography sites available. We might have to use other means to try to get at them and stuff. And then for the specific content providers of what it is, porn sites, we'll probably need to either implement age verification or, as we've already seen with one of the biggest providers out there, pull out of the state. So we'll have to see what the implications of that going into the future are. But I think overall, this is a good bill, and we'll see how it moves. Time will only tell, but I think it's just, could be simply put, is that we're updating our obscenity material laws to the digital world. Which, if you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe or follow us on YouTube or Rumble to stay up to date on all things Idaho. For even more content to support our work, check out our locals page. I know you'll love it. If you found our content valuable, please like and share it with friends and family. Your support helps us spread the word about our beautiful state and keep Idahoans informed and engaged. Thank you for being part of the local Yokel Idaho community. Now, on to the next segment. Which this one is a little bit more on a lighter or more happy note. We went on that one. I felt like it was very time important because that bill goes into effect and the news came out about the major porn site and whatever else. But this one is definitely a little bit more friendly, which is Eastern Idaho water crisis. What is going on? I know this last week it's been blazing, as we talked about in the banner, but as many of you know, there's also been something equally hot going on with the water crisis in Eastern. I know it made national news. I know Alex Jones talked about it to a certain degree, and there were a bunch of different outlets. It made national news. I think even Biden made a press conference or whatever about it. I didn't watch that because I probably would have fallen asleep, but we initially reported on this about in the midweek report, but I felt we should do a deeper dive into it to give you all the depth that we could and to clear up any confusion, because I've had a couple people mention some stuff there. So in this segment, we'll be looking at the events that happened leading up and after the curtailment, seeing what the water rights in Idaho and how that plays out in this situation, where we're currently at, and then clean up any confusion there may be. But starting first off with that, what is the history kind of going into this and the events that happened, John?
Yeah, so in May of 23, the Idaho Department of Water Resources, or IDWR, IDWR, we're going to go with IDWR because that's just easier. There's also the Idaho Groundwater Appropriations, so we're going to go IDWR and IGWA.
This is great.
These are terrible ones. Anyway, so IDWR, they notified thousands of farmers in eastern Idaho that they faced potential curtailment. Wow, that's a word. That they faced potential curtailment of their water access due to an expected shortage. This was done according to a 2016 mitigation agreement between the surface water users, represented by the Surface Water Coalition, or SWC, SWIC, maybe, I guess, and groundwater users. And this is IGWA. There you go. So the curtailment orders led to viral videos and social media posts claiming that the government was unfairly shutting off water to farmers. How dare they? Idaho regulates water rights according to the doctrine of prior appropriation, or first in right. This means whoever began using a water source earliest has priority rights to that water. The Twin Falls Canal Company, TFCC, and other Magic Valley surface water users have senior water rights dating back to the early 1900s, while Eastern Idaho groundwater pumpers have junior rights starting in the 1940s. The Eastern Snake River Plain Aquifer, ESPA, provides both groundwater for eastern Idaho and feeds surface water in the Magic Valley. And due to the interconnectedness of ground and surface water, excessive groundwater pumping in eastern Idaho can reduce water available to senior surface water rights holders downstream. Does this all make sense? It seems kind of complicated. And it is. So after mediation, the groundwater districts agreed to mitigation plans to reduce usage and allow the ESPA to recharge, avoiding the curtailment. Governor Brad Little said that he could not unilaterally stop the curtailment orders without violating Idaho law and the state constitution.
I know it was a lot of words, and trust me, I had to read it multiple times to figure it and learn it all out, but I wanted to give it in the terms, so then I can break it down and it all makes sense. You know, when someone starts talking to you about chess and you never played chess, it makes no sense, but you need to know those terms. So basically, first off, in very simple terms, everything is connected. The mountain has all the snowpack. We all understand that. It's up there and everything, and then that melts off, and then that goes down into the aquifer. In the aquifer, you have groundwater, which is groundwater thinks like something that's on the top, but no, it's the aquifer underneath. And you have surface water. You've got those two parts. You have to balance those because they're interconnected. In this specific situation, what you have is that the mountains surrounding the Snake, I think it's the Snake River water basin or whatever, the aquifer there over in eastern Idaho, The water comes in from those mountains at one point and fills up the aquifer. But the problem is then that aquifer feeds a lot of the rivers to the west, so over towards Magic Valley. So if you pump too much from the aquifer further up, then the rivers and all the streams and all the canals and the surface water people down the line over in Magic Valley into the west don't get anything. So you have to balance how much you're pumping there based on how much snow fell, so that it actually gets down to everybody else down the line type of thing. Also, because the pumping stations, there's a bit of seniority. That all being brought in, what ended up basically happening with the situation is that people decided to push, in this case maybe to test. Others might be just, if we want to be more generous, don't trust the government. COVID's kind of a thing that happened that people lost a lot of trust in governments. So the government said, hey, you need to not pump more water because it's going to affect people downstream. People either said, I think you're wrong and I'm going to call your bluff and pump anyways, or I don't trust you or believe what you're saying at all because COVID, and so I'm going to pump anyways. That's where the curtailment order said to stop them, to say you're not within the requirements, so we can take legal action and you need to stop pumping. Then they got back in their lane. Now there's an agreement that's been met by both so that they're actually pumping correctly according to the agreements and rules. That is all of it in a nutshell. So everyone has water now, but everyone is very interested about this and all the things that have gone on with it.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. Water rights are ridiculous and wild. I remember talking with my brother-in-law about... we came out of watching, Dune Part 2. We were watching that and we came out, and one of the previews was for the Civil War movie, which came and went and no one really cared. But anyway, it was a thing, so we talked about it a little bit. And one of the questions that he asked me was, what states could, barring any, military action or anything, just thinking economically, what states could even secede from the Union and exist all by themselves? And the only one we could come up with was maybe Texas or Idaho. Maybe we have our own farms, but as we started thinking about it, states that are downriver, they would have a really hard time. If we stopped caring about people downriver, then shoot, we're just going to use all the water and that'll be that. These questions are really important. It's really important that we pay close attention to this. I've said it any number of times. I lived in Albuquerque for a long time, and the Rio Grande down there is not a grand river, which, the Spanish is Rio Grande. Grande, of course, is grand. It's a pathetic river. It's really small. You no longer have to swim through it. You can walk through it. And that's because all of that water is being sucked out in so many other places. And there's just no water left to get down to New Mexico. Water rights are important. I would say that this is another place where it makes sense for our government to be involved. As annoying as it might be for some farmers or cities or jurisdictions, it's an important thing. Water is a big deal. We kind of live in a desert, and we've kind of brought a lot of water in and around so that we can turn our desert into farmland.
We have really engineered the living daylights out of it.
We have. Idaho's high desert. Water's super important in the desert. It just kind of is what it is.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the downstream thing. Brian Ullman, he did a very good article looking in depth on it, and I used it for a lot of the research for this video. And he was citing over in Texas, they don't have the same water right law we have, so for us it's first in time, first in right type of saying. So if you're the first there, then you have the newer water right in a sense. Well, in Texas, they don't actually have that at all. It's that whatever your property touches from heaven to bottom, that's yours. So that means the property can pump as much water as they want, and there's certain areas where the aquifer is completely depleted. There's no water anymore. No one can do ag because people just said, we're going to go ham at it. The state can't do anything because technically that's your property. The water touches your property, therefore it's yours. Rather than in Idaho, we have first in time, first in right, which actually says, well, yeah, there are rights. You do have a certain right to that water, but that doesn't mean your right trumps to a certain degree too much of other people. Now, obviously, a senior water right person compared to a junior is going to get a little uppity about that, but that's where you have that hierarchy to give a little bit of preference to a certain degree. And it helps cut out big businesses because, in theory, big businesses could buy all the wells in an area or property that has senior or a bunch of the water in a sense, and they can pump as much as they want rather than the small guy can't. But right now, if you're a small guy that's been around for generations, you have that senior water right, you're still fine and good. It's only the guy that put a new stick in that has to give way to you.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario. We've seen either Bill Gates or Chinese companies start coming in and buying a ton of farmland. And, as previously mentioned, water's important for farming. That's definitely an interesting way that we can try and protect against that.
Right.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that happens when you buy land or transfer it or stuff like that. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, also another thing to put with this that I'd like to state is that it wasn't that the water or the statewide water board sit there and went to those farmers and said, well, you need to stop and you can't do your crops or anything. It was that the farmers went and said they pushed the bounds of the agreement. The agreement didn't say they couldn't pull water.
Yeah.
It just couldn't say you can't pull more than this water. And they decided to push the envelope, and thus the water board responded and said, well, you're outside the terms of the agreement, you're pulling too much, so you're going to get a curtailment and you're going to get shut off as a punishment. They got back in their lane and the discussion's fixed. So in all fairness, this wasn't the state starting it, this was the farmers calling the government's bluff, which I know for some people that maybe are on the more conspiratorial end, that's not... It wasn't the government doing it. So that would be the first confusion I'd like to clear up. But the second one that I know I've had a lot of people ask me about specifically on this story is, and I don't remember exactly where it originally came from, but there's a cobalt mine that we've talked about in the midweek report and other stuff that's over there in eastern Idaho. And someone was saying that had a reason to do with a curtailment order because it was pulling so much from the aquifer, but since it's not part of the technical ag water right situation, it was pulling, and thus that was hurting the farmers. And the cobalt mine is technically funded by the Biden administration, so is this whole story of Biden administration wants their battery for the cobalt for their batteries and stuff, and they leave Idaho farmers out in the rain. But the cobalt mine actually, they get almost all their water from the mining or different stuff that they're getting, and the only water they're using is just to make sure that dust doesn't fly everywhere for miles and miles. It's just kind of dust suppression and for rinsing stuff. So they're not actually using that much, and they're any of the water that they are tapping into isn't from the Snake River aquifer. So if anybody tells you that the two are connected, legitimate, if you have something I haven't seen, please send it over. But I couldn't find any substantial evidence to say that the cobalt mine was the fault. And also the cobalt mine has been not doing anything since March of this year, if I remember correctly. They only just started up recently because the Biden administration gave them a big giant check to subsidize the cost of mining cobalt. Because cobalt isn't quite... Cobalt was, when they put the mine in, was like, I think $25 or $35 a pound, but it's only at $15 and like 25 cents or something right now from that high. But the Biden administration wants the mine because it's the only mine in North America right now that can mine cobalt, so it's seen as a like strategic thing for the military so that we can be self-sufficient.
Well, cobalt is kind of a big deal, so yeah, that makes sense.
So, anywho... Going forward, the best way to look at this is it's a balancing act. We need to be careful with it. We need to conserve it. I haven't dug too far, but if it's something you guys want to see, please message me about it, about doing a story researching the aquifer over here in the Treasure Valley area, because some wells have been drying up. And if there's a thing like that happening here or groups like that, or not, because I haven't heard about that at all, but it seems like Eastern Idaho is really involved in that. The other thing would be that water is something we shouldn't take for granted. I know in the modern world, you just go down to the tap, turn it on, we literally go play in it in the summer, turn the sprinkler system on, right? You just think, there's water. We're very spoiled in our modern age, especially in America, the idea that there's just water, and you turn a tap, and it's anywhere, and it's clean, and it's maintained. That to achieve that, there are a lot of rules, a lot of balancing acts that are done, and a lot of engineering that's been used to all pull that off. And the second and last point I'd give is, like anything, if you wonder sometimes why here at Local Yokel we might not get the story out the fastest or be the first on the scene, is exactly for things like this. Wait until the facts are. When things are immediately happening, there's going to be a lot of flack in the air. There's going to be a lot of dust. It's going to be really hard to tell what is right and what is wrong. I understand to a point you want to research a thing when it's happening and to be involved in that, and that's fair. But be careful until you hear all the facts and you've really carefully checked their sources, because people like to say things and people like drama. Drama is the thing that I swear fuels half of Idaho at times. We love the grapevine and I love it about Idaho, but also in other ways it is not helpful.
Yeah. Is this where I drop the term cheap fakes? Just drop a bomb and run away?
Like, cheap fakes, Biden administration. I'm gone.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, be careful for the cheap fakes in Idaho about your water rights. Call us, the factual source. No.
That's right. That's right. We'll tell you what's true.
Yeah. We'll just, while using an AI to make a full image of it. So yeah, see, true. We said true words with the AI, see?
Yeah, we asked ChatGPT. It told us.
Yeah.
And I trust ChatGPT always.
Always and forever, apparently. Skynet is soon. With that said, thank you for tuning in for the entire show. I hope you found it both enjoyable and informative. If we missed any important points or got wrong details on stuff like we mentioned above, please reach out to us via email at lyimedia@protonmail.com or on Twitter at localyocalidaho. We appreciate your support and feedback as we work to bring you the most interesting and important stories from across Idaho. That's all for now. Have a great rest of your week and Godspeed.